The hand signal in my headlights faded, but the silhouette was still there, motionless. A driver weighs helping a stranger against his own safety late at night. And one choice changes everything. She could have been stranded for hours, or she could have been waiting for someone like him to stop. Why did he pull over that night? Why was the woman silent? And what were the road crews tracking 2 days later? The highway stretched empty in both directions. Gary Mendez had been driving 18-wheelers for 11 years, and he knew this stretch of County Road 214 better than most. It was May 9th, 2019, just past 11 p.m., and the next truck stop was 40 miles out. His electronic logbook showed he had 90 minutes left on his shift before the federal limit kicked in. He had planned to reach the fuel island by midnight, grab a shower and sleep in the cab. The headlights caught her at the last second. She stood on the gravel shoulder, right arm raised, palm out. Not a thumb, not a wave, a stop gesture. Gary's foot moved to the brake pedal without thinking. The rig hissed and slowed. He pulled onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires. She walked to the passenger side. Gary leaned across and cranked the window down. The woman was in her mid-20s, wearing denim shorts and a faded tank top. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. A small backpack hung from one shoulder. She looked tired but not panicked. No tears, no visible injuries, just tired. "You headed north?" she asked. Her voice was flat, almost rehearsed. "Up to the junction," Gary said. "I can take you that far." She nodded once and opened the door. She climbed in without hesitation, set the backpack between her feet, and pulled the door shut. The cab light faded. Gary waited for her to buckle in, then eased the rig back onto the road. The engine settled into a low rumble. "Name's Gary," he offered. "Thanks for stopping," she said. She didn't give her name. Gary glanced at her in the mirror. She was staring straight ahead, hands folded in her lap. Her fingers were clean, no dirt under the nails. The backpack looked new, no scuffs or worn straps. He'd picked up hitchhikers before, usually broke college kids or travelers with car trouble. They all had a story. This one didn't. "You got a phone?" Gary asked. "Case you need to call someone." "It's dead," she said. He pointed to the charging cable plugged into the dash. "Help yourself." She shook her head. "It's fine." The silence stretched. Gary turned the radio on low, country station out of the last town. The woman didn't react. Her breathing was steady, her posture stiff. After 10 minutes, Gary tried again. "Car breakdown?" "Something like that." "You from around here?" "Not really." He let it drop. Some people didn't want to talk, and that was their right. But something felt off. She hadn't asked where the junction was, hadn't asked if he could drop her near a town. She just sat there, staring at the road. At 11:30, Gary's phone buzzed in the cup holder. He glanced down. A text from his dispatcher. Routine message. He set the phone back down. The woman's eyes flicked toward it, just for a second, then away. "You sure you don't want to charge your phone?" Gary asked. "I'm sure." Another 15 minutes passed. The road curved west, following the tree line. No other vehicles, no lights except the rigs. Gary checked the mirror again. The woman was still staring ahead, but her right hand had moved to the backpack. Her fingers rested on the zipper pull. "You okay?" Gary asked. "Fine." The word came too fast. Gary's grip on the wheel tightened. He'd been through safety training, knew the warnings. If someone seemed off, trust your gut. If they wouldn't talk, keep space between you. If they acted strange, find a reason to stop in a public place. "There's a rest area about 10 miles up," Gary said. "I need to check the tires. You want me to drop you there? Vending machines, bathroom, usually a couple other trucks around." She turned to look at him for the first time since getting in. Her eyes were dark, expression unreadable. I'd rather stay with you." Gary felt a chill run through his chest. That wasn't how people asked for rides. They wanted to get somewhere, not stay with someone. "Look," he said, keeping his voice calm. "I don't mind helping, but I need to know you're safe. You got someone I can call? Family? Friend?" "No." "What about the police? You need help?" "I don't need the police." Gary's mind raced. She wasn't drunk, wasn't on anything he could see, but something was wrong. The flat voice, the stillness, the hand on the backpack zipper. He thought about pulling over right there, but the road was empty and dark. If something happened, no one would know. He kept driving. At 11:45, he saw the rest area sign, half a mile. He signaled early, slowing the rig. The woman's hand moved. The zipper opened. Gary heard the metallic rasp over the engine noise. His heart hammered. He wanted to look, but he kept his eyes on the road. "I'm stopping here," he said. "You can get out, or you can stay, but I'm checking those tires." "Okay." The rig rolled into the rest area. 2 other trucks were parked at the far end, cab lights off. Gary chose a spot near the building, under a floodlight. He set the parking brake, left the engine running. The woman didn't move. "You getting out?" Gary asked. She looked at him again. This time, her expression shifted. Not fear, not anger. Something else. Recognition, maybe, or relief. "You're not going to hurt me," she said. Gary blinked. "What?" "No, I just gave you a ride." "I know." She reached into the backpack. Gary tensed. She pulled out a phone. Not dead. The screen glowed. She held it up so he could see. A map app was open. A blue dot, tracking their location. A second dot, red, sat 15 miles back on County Road 214. "That's where I was," she said. "And that's where he is." Gary stared. "Who?" "The guy I was with. He's following us." "Following? How do you know?" She turned the phone toward herself, tapped the screen. "His truck has a tracker. I set it up 3 days ago. He doesn't know." Gary's stomach dropped. "Why would you do that?" "Because he wasn't going to let me leave." The words hung in the cab. Gary looked at the map again. The red dot was moving, slowly along the same road they'd just traveled. 15 miles back, maybe 20 minutes away. "You need to call the cops," Gary said. "I can't. He'll know. He'll run, and I need him caught." "What did he do?" She didn't answer right away. She tapped the phone again, pulled up a photo. Gary leaned in. It showed a woman's face, bruised and swollen. Same woman. Taken in a bathroom mirror, harsh fluorescent light. "He did this 2 weeks ago," she said. "And he said if I went to the police he'd say I attacked him first. He's got friends in the sheriff's office." I needed proof. Gary felt the weight of it settle over him. She wasn't random. This wasn't chance. She'd planned this. "So you waited for someone to stop," he said. "And you tracked him to make sure he'd follow." "Yeah." "Why me?" "You were the first one who looked safe." Gary rubbed his face. His shift timer was still counting down. He had an hour left. The junction was 30 miles ahead. The man following them was 15 miles back. "What do you want me to do?" Gary asked. "Drive to the junction. There's a state police barracks there. I'll go in, show them the tracker, show them the photos. They'll stop him on the road." "And if he catches up first?" "He won't. He's in a pickup. You're in a loaded rig. You're faster on the straights." Gary wasn't sure that was true, but he didn't argue. He put the rig in gear, pulled out of the rest area, and merged back onto the highway. The woman kept the phone in her lap, screen on, watching the red dot. They drove in silence for 10 minutes. The dot moved closer. 12 miles. 11. Gary pushed the rig harder, the speedometer climbing. The woman's breathing stayed even. but her hands were shaking now. "What's his name?" Gary asked. "Does it matter?" "It might." "Tyler Cobb. 32. Drives for a freight company out of state. He's been in my life for 8 months." "You report him before?" "Twice. Both times, they said there wasn't enough evidence." Gary clenched his jaw. He'd heard stories like this. Not enough proof, not enough witnesses, not enough time. People fell through the cracks. The junction appeared ahead, a cluster of lights at the intersection of two highways. Gary saw the state police barracks on the left, a low brick building with 4 patrol cars parked outside. He signaled, slowed, turned into the lot. The woman grabbed her backpack and opened the door before the rig stopped. "Thank you," she said. "Wait," Gary said. "You need me to come in?" "No, just tell them you picked me up on 214. Give them your logbook data. It'll prove the timeline." She climbed down and walked toward the building. Gary watched her go, then looked at his phone. The dispatcher's message was still on the screen. He pulled up his electronic logbook app, checked the logs. His location, speed, stops, all recorded. Proof. He killed the engine and followed her inside. The officer at the desk looked tired. Gary explained the situation, showed his logbook, gave his license number. The woman was already in a back room, talking to a detective. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled out, lights on, heading south on 214. Gary sat in the waiting area. The officer brought him coffee. An hour passed. At 1:30 a.m., the detective came out. "We got him," she said. "Stopped him. 8 miles south. Found rope, zip ties, and a knife in the cab. He lawyered up, but the evidence is solid." Gary felt the tension drain out of his shoulders. "She okay?" "She's safe, and she's got a restraining order filed. We'll hold him on the weapons charge, work up the assault case from there." "What about the tracker? Is that legal?" The detective smiled slightly. "It was on a vehicle she co-owned. Technically legal. Smart move, actually. Without it, we wouldn't have caught him en route." Gary nodded. The woman emerged from the back room, eyes red but steady. She walked over to him. "I owe you more than a thank you," she said. "You don't owe me anything," Gary replied. "You did the hard part." She handed him a folded piece of paper. "My lawyer's info. If you need anything for the case, call her. And if you're ever in trouble, call me." Gary took the paper, slid it into his pocket. "You got a place to stay tonight?" "They're setting me up with a shelter. I'll be fine." She shook his hand and walked out with a victim advocate. Gary watched through the glass doors as they drove away. The detective sat down next to him. "You did good," she said. "Most people wouldn't have stopped." "Most people wouldn't have needed me to," Gary said. He walked back to his rig, climbed into the cab, and sat for a long moment. The clock on the dash read 2 a.m. His shift was over. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to his dispatcher, explaining the delay. Then he started the engine and headed for the truck stop. 3 days later, Gary was back on the same stretch of highway, County Road 214. Midday this time. He passed the spot where he'd picked her up. The shoulder was empty, just gravel and weeds. No sign anyone had ever been there. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. "Gary, it's Sarah, from the other night." He recognized the voice. "You okay?" "Yeah. I wanted to let you know they charged him. Assault, unlawful restraint, weapons possession. He's not getting bail." "That's good." "It is. And I wanted to say something else. You asked me why I picked you. I said you looked safe. That wasn't the whole truth." Gary waited. "I'd been standing there for 2 hours," she said. 12 trucks passed. You were the only one who slowed down." Gary didn't know what to say to that. "Anyway, Sarah continued. "Thank you. For real. Take care of yourself," Gary said. "You too." The line went dead. Gary set the phone down and kept driving. The highway stretched ahead, empty and straight. He thought about the 12 trucks that hadn't stopped. He thought about the one that did. He thought about the difference between them. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at the truck stop, where Gary picked up his mail. Inside was a coffee mug with a handwritten note. "For the next long shift, stay safe." No signature, but he knew who it was from. Gary used that mug every trip after that. It sat in the cup holder next to his phone, a reminder that sometimes stopping was the right call. Sometimes one choice split the world in two, and you only found out later which version you were living in. The weeks between the arrest and the trial moved slowly for Gary. He kept driving his routes, but the memory of that night stayed with him. Every time he passed through County Road 214, he saw the spot where Sarah had stood. The gravel shoulder looked the same, but it felt different now. The prosecutor called him in September for a pre-trial meeting. Her office was in a strip mall, next to a tax service and a nail salon. Gary sat in a plastic chair and went through his statement 3 times. Each time, she asked the same questions from different angles. "When you first saw her, what made you think she needed help?" The way she stood, not moving, not waving frantically, just waiting. "And you stopped because she looked like she needed someone to stop." The prosecutor made notes on a yellow pad. "The defense is going to argue you couldn't have known she was in danger. They'll say she used you as part of a plan to entrap their client." "That's not how it was." "I know. But we need to be clear about what you saw, what you knew, and when you knew it." Gary walked her through the timeline again. The stop gesture, the flat voice, the dead phone that wasn't dead, the moment she opened the backpack and showed him the tracker. Each detail mattered. The prosecutor leaned back in her chair. "You did the right thing. I want you to know that." "I just drove," Gary said. "You did more than that. You gave her a way out." The trial started on a Tuesday in late October. Gary took 2 days off work and drove down in his personal truck. The courthouse was old, brick and concrete, with a metal detector at the entrance. He waited in the hallway outside the courtroom for 3 hours before they called him to testify. The courtroom was smaller than he expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, a handful of people in the gallery. Sarah sat at the prosecutor's table, wearing a gray suit. She didn't look at him when he walked in. The bailiff swore him in. Gary sat in the witness box and looked at the jury, 12 faces, tired and attentive. The prosecutor stood. "Please state your name and occupation for the record." "Gary Mendez, long-haul truck driver." "And on the night of May 9th, 2019, where were you?" "Driving northbound on County Road 214, about 40 miles south of the junction." "What time?" "Just past 11 p.m. "And what happened?" Gary told the story, the headlights catching Sarah on the shoulder, the stop gesture, the ride, the silence, the backpack zipper, the rest area, the phone with 2 dots on a map, the drive to the state police barracks. The prosecutor walked him through each detail. What Sarah said, what Gary saw, what the tracker showed. The prosecutor entered Gary's electronic logbook into evidence, a printout showing his exact location and speed at every minute of the drive. "This device," the prosecutor said, holding up the printout, "it can't be tampered with, correct?" "No. It's synced with GPS and the truck's computer. Federal law requires it. So these timestamps are accurate to the second." "Yes. And according to this log, you picked up the defendant's victim at 11:07 p.m. on County Road 214. "That's right. And you arrived at the state police barracks at 12:31 a.m. "Yes." The prosecutor thanked him and sat down. The defense attorney stood up. He was younger than Gary expected, wearing a suit that looked too big. "Mr. Mendez, you've been driving trucks for how long?" 11 years at that point. "And in those 11 years, how many hitchhikers have you picked up?" "Maybe 20. "Maybe? So you don't remember them all?" "Some I remember. Some I don't." "But you remember this woman. Why is that?" "Because of what happened after." "What happened after?" the defense attorney said. "Not what happened during. You didn't think anything was strange at the time." "I thought something was off. That's why I stopped at the rest area." "But you kept driving with her. You didn't ask her to get out. She needed help. I wasn't going to leave her on the side of the road." "She told you a man was following her. Did you see this man?" "Not directly. I saw the tracker on her phone." "A tracker she showed you?" "A tracker, she said, was on someone's vehicle." "You took her word for it?" "Yes." "You didn't verify it?" "How would I verify it? I'm not a cop." The defense attorney smiled slightly. "Exactly. You're not a cop. So why did you involve yourself in what amounts to a domestic dispute? Because she asked for help? Or because she needed a witness for a plan she'd already set in motion?" The prosecutor objected. The judge sustained. The defense attorney moved on, asking about the timeline, the stops, the conversations. Gary answered each question the same way he'd answered the prosecutor. Calm, factual, no embellishment. After 20 minutes, the defense attorney gave up. No further questions. Gary stepped down. Sarah looked at him as he walked past. She mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Gary nodded and left the courtroom. He sat in his truck in the parking lot, engine off, windows down. The October air was cool, leaves falling from the oak trees around the courthouse. He thought about the trial, the questions, the way the defense attorney had tried to twist things. None of it changed what happened. Sarah had needed help, and Gary had stopped. The verdict came 2 days later. Guilty on all counts. Assault in the 2nd degree, unlawful restraint, possession of burglary tools. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for November. Gary didn't attend the sentencing. He was on a run to the West Coast, hauling electronics, but Sarah texted him the result. 15 years. "Thank you." Gary sent back a thumbs up and kept driving. The months after the trial felt strange. Gary went back to his normal routes. But the story had gotten out. Other drivers heard about it, asked him questions at truck stops. Some called him a hero. Gary didn't see it that way. He'd just done what anyone should do. But not everyone agreed. A driver named Pete cornered him at a fuel island in December. "You know you put a target on your back, right? Picking up strangers?" "She wasn't a stranger by the end," Gary said. "That's not the point. You never know who you're dealing with. Could have been a setup, could have been anything. It wasn't. This time. What about next time?" Gary didn't have an answer for that. He finished fueling and drove away. Pete's words stuck with him, though. The idea that helping someone was a risk too big to take. That staying safe meant staying isolated. Gary didn't buy it. He'd spent 11 years on the road, and the best parts of the job were the people. The guy at the diner who remembered his order, the dispatcher who checked in when weather got bad, the hitchhiker who needed a ride and said thank you when they got out. Sure, there were risks, but there were risks in everything. Driving itself was a risk. Every time Gary pulled onto the highway, he trusted thousands of other drivers to stay in their lanes, follow the rules, not fall asleep at the wheel. Trust was part of the deal. The package from Sarah arrived in January, a year after the trial. Gary opened it at the truck stop mail desk. Inside was the coffee mug and the note. He read the note twice, then folded it and put it in his wallet next to his CDL. The mug became a regular part of his cab setup. It sat in the cup holder next to his phone, refilled at every stop. Other drivers noticed it, asked about the handwriting. Gary told the story when he felt like it, stayed quiet when he didn't. By the spring of 2021, Gary had driven County Road 214 hundreds of times since that night. The spot where he'd picked up Sarah was just another stretch of shoulder now. No marker, no sign, just gravel and weeds. But Gary remembered. Every time he passed, he slowed down slightly, glanced at the shoulder, and thought about the hand signal in his headlights. The moment when he could have kept driving, and didn't. One night in April, he was on the same road, same time, just past 11 p.m. The headlights caught someone on the shoulder. A man this time, older, standing next to a broken-down sedan. Gary slowed, pulled over. The man walked to the window. "You got a phone? Mine's dead." Gary handed him a phone charger. "Pop your hood. I'll take a look." The problem was a loose battery cable. Gary tightened it with a wrench from his toolkit. The sedan started. The man thanked him, offered money. Gary waved it off. "Just pay it forward," Gary said. He got back in his rig and pulled onto the road. The man flashed his lights twice in thanks. Gary smiled and kept driving. That was the job, really. Not the freight or the deadlines. It was the moments in between. The people you met, the small helps you could offer, the choice to stop instead of driving past. Gary thought about Sarah sometimes, wondered where she was, if she was safe, if she'd managed to rebuild. He hoped so. 15 years was a long time, long enough to start over, to become someone new. He never tried to find her. That wasn't his place. He'd been part of her story for 2 hours on a dark highway. That was enough. She had her life, and he had his. They'd intersected once, at the exact moment they needed to, and then moved on. But the memory stayed. The night he stopped for a stranger, and everything changed. Not just for her, but for him too. It reminded him why he drove in the first place, why he chose this life, this job, this road. Because out here you met people, real people with real problems. And sometimes, if you paid attention, you could help. Not save, not fix, just help. And in a world that felt more disconnected every day, that mattered. The mug stayed in the cup holder. The note stayed in the wallet, and Gary kept driving, kept stopping when it felt right, kept being the kind of person who pulled over when someone needed help. Years later, when he finally retired, Gary kept the mug. It sat on his kitchen counter, a reminder of the night everything changed. His kids asked about it once. Gary told them the story, the short version: a woman on a dark road, a 2-hour drive, a choice to stop. "Were you scared?" his daughter asked. "Yeah, for a little while." "But you stopped anyway." "Yeah, I stopped anyway." His daughter nodded. Like that made sense. And maybe it did. Maybe that was the lesson. Fear didn't mean you drove past. It just meant you paid attention. Gary poured coffee into the mug and looked out the kitchen window. The road was visible from here. A 2-lane highway running past his house. Cars passed by. Trucks rolled through. People headed somewhere. And Gary thought about all the times he'd been one of those people. Out there on the road, moving between places, living in the spaces between destinations, the truck stops and rest areas, the diners and motels, the long stretches of empty highway where anything could happen. That was where he'd spent most of his life, out there in motion, and he didn't regret it, not a single mile. Because the road had given him stories, some funny, some sad, some strange. And one night, it had given him the chance to help someone when they needed it most. That was enough. That was more than enough. When you think about a stranger's decision to stop on a dark highway, how much of it comes down to instinct versus the 100 small choices that led to that moment? Gary didn't stay for the sentencing. He had a load to deliver and a schedule to keep. Sarah sent him a text a week later. 15 years, thank you. He texted back a thumbs up and got back on the road. The years rolled by. Gary kept driving County Road 214, kept seeing hitchhikers sometimes, though fewer than before. But every now and then, someone would be standing on the shoulder, thumb out or hand raised. He didn't stop for everyone. He couldn't. The industry had rules, and his company had policies. But when the situation felt right, when someone looked stranded rather than dangerous, he'd pull over. Most of the time, it was nothing. A quick ride, a thank you, and that was it. But once in a while, it was something more. Someone who needed help and had run out of options. Gary couldn't save everyone, but he could stop when it mattered. The question he never answered was what made him slow down that particular night. 11 years on the road when it happened. Thousands of miles, hundreds of people passed by. Why her? Why then? Maybe it was the way she stood, still and certain. Maybe it was the stop gesture instead of a plea. Maybe it was just timing, the universe lining things up, so one driver and one passenger ended up in the same place at the same moment. Or maybe it was simpler. Maybe he stopped because he could, because the road was empty, the night was long, and someone needed help, and in the end, that was all the reason anyone needed. Gary never saw Sarah again after the trial, but he thought about her sometimes, wondered if she'd rebuilt her life, if she felt safe now. He hoped the sentence gave her enough time to start over, to become someone new. The mug stayed in his cup holder through every run. The note stayed in his wallet, and every time he drove past that spot on County Road 214, he remembered the hand signal in his headlights, the silhouette on the shoulder, and the moment he chose to stop. That choice made all the difference, not just for her, but for him too. It reminded him why he'd started driving, not for the money or the freedom, but for the people, the strangers you meet, the stories you hear, the moments when your path crosses someone else's. That's what the road was really about. Not the miles or the freight. It was about the people. And sometimes, you got to be the one who helped when it really mattered. After that night, every hitchhiker was Sarah. Every person on the roadside was someone who might need more than a ride. Gary didn't stop for all of them, but he looked at them differently, saw them as people with stories, with reasons for being where they were. And when he did stop, he paid attention, watched for the signs Sarah had shown him, the flat voice, the phone that was dead but wasn't, the hand that moved with purpose. Most of the time there was nothing, but Gary stayed alert anyway. The years turned. Gary's hair went gray. His knees started aching. The industry changed around him, but the core of the job stayed the same. Pick up the freight, deliver it, get paid, repeat, and in between, you met people, you heard stories. That was the part Gary loved. In 2024, Gary finally retired. 26 years on the road, millions of miles logged. His company threw him a party. Gary smiled and thanked everyone and went home to the small house he'd bought 3 years earlier. The first month was strange. Gary woke at 5 a.m. out of habit, then remembered he didn't have anywhere to be. He drank coffee on the porch and watched the sun come up. He worked in the garden. He visited his kids. But he missed the road, missed the engine hum, the wheel under his hands, missed the truck stops and diners where the coffee was always hot. Most of all, he missed the people, the brief connections that came and went like mile markers. The mug sat on his kitchen counter now. Gary looked at it every morning and remembered Sarah, remembered the night he stopped, and everything that followed. His kids visited for Thanksgiving. His daughter saw the mug and asked about it. Gary told the story, the dark highway, the stop gesture, the silent ride, the backpack zipper, the phone with 2 dots, the race to the police barracks. When he finished, his daughter asked what everyone asked. "Yeah," Gary said. "For a little while. When she opened the backpack, I didn't know what was coming." "But you didn't make her get out." "No. She needed help more than I needed to feel safe." That night, Gary stood on his porch and looked at the highway in the distance. Cars passed by, headlights cutting through the dark. He thought about all the times he'd been one of those lights moving between places. He thought about Sarah, wherever she was, about the 12 trucks that passed her before he stopped, about what separated his choice from theirs. Not skill, not experience, just willingness. That was the lesson. You couldn't help everyone. The road was full of people who needed more than one person could give. But you could pay attention. You could see people as human, with stories and struggles. And when the moment came, when someone needed help, you could choose to stop. That choice didn't make you a hero. It just made you decent. And maybe that was enough. Maybe the world didn't need heroes. It needed people willing to stop when it mattered. When you think about when you think about a stranger's decision to stop on a dark highway, how much comes down to instinct versus all the choices that led to that moment?